on!
Hello everyone and welcome to It's About Time. Today we have some great performances lined up for you from David Hughes and Molly Davies and a very special guest. But first, please welcome David Hughes.
Until Sally, I was never happy. I needed so much more. Rain clouds, oh, they used to chase me. Down they were poor. Sugar and spice. And all things nice. Sent to me from heaven. Sally Cinnamon, you're my world. A pop 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 pop. You taste the cherry eight. The brimstone, the burn has spoken. From what you are made. Sugar and spice. And all things nice. Sent to me from heaven. Sally Cinnamon, you're my world.
Thank you, David, that was amazing. So today's guest, who's come all the way from Scotland, will be the Mary Queen of Scots.
Mary Queen of Scots is one of the most prominent figures in Scottish history. She reigned as a controversial monarch for over 25 years, at a time of political unrest between the split Catholic and Protestant Scotland. Also, having been on the throne as an infant, married 3 times, and a threat to Queen Elizabeth for her claim to the English crown, Mary's life was filled with scandal, treachery and murder. Mary Stuart was born in 1542 and was only a week old when she was proclaimed queen after the death of her father, King James V of Scotland. At this time, neighbouring England was ruled by King Henry VIII, who was Tudor. Henry VIII was excommunicated by the Pope as a result of his failed marriages, and England moved from the Catholic faith and became Protestant, and so did Scotland despite Mary, their queen, being a devout Catholic. Most of Mary's childhood was spent in France, where she was sent to be betrothed to the French king's heir, the Dauphin Francis, to secure a Catholic alliance against England. In 1559, Mary married Francis and briefly became Francis' Queen of Consort. However, just 2 years later, he died, and following his death, and after being childless with Mary, his younger brother Charles succeeded him, and Mary returned to Scotland. Having lived in France since the age of 5, Mary had little experience of the dangerous and complex political situation in Scotland. John Knox, a Protestant reformer, began preaching against Mary, and despite many attempts to charge him with treason, he was always acquitted and released. To the disappointment of the Catholic party, Mary tolerated the newly established Protestant ascendancy and kept her half-brother, Lord Moray, as her chief advisor. Her Privy Council of 16 men was dominated by the Protestant leaders, with only 4 of the councillors being Catholic. Also, Mary's claim to the English throne caused an unsettling rivalry between her and her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. When Mary tried looking for a new husband, Elizabeth suggested she married English Protestant Robert Dudley, a man Elizabeth trusted and thought she could control. Instead, however, Mary married Lord Darnley in 1565. He came from a family of Scottish nobles and English landowners, and this marriage alliance caused Elizabeth to feel even more threatened. Although initially marrying for love, Mary's marriage with Darnley did not end very well, with him becoming arrogant and unhappy with his position as king consort, demanding the crown matrimonial. Mary refused him and the marriage grew strained, even though they gave birth to James VI in 1566. Then in 1568, Darnley died mysteriously at an explosion at Kirkfield, and rumour circulated that Mary's new lover, the Earl of Bothwell, had killed Darnley. The Earl was arrested but never brought to trial, and just 3 months after Darnley's death, Mary married Bothwell. The public opinion of Mary now swung against her, which caused Bothwell to flee abroad, only to die in prison in Denmark, and for Mary to surrender herself to Parliament. She was imprisoned at Lochleven Castle and forced to abdicate the throne in favour of her infant son, and Lord Moray was named regent. After being forced to abdicate, Mary fled and sought the protection of her cousin Elizabeth, who had her arrested, and in England she spent the remaining 19 years of her life imprisoned. In 1586, Mary was accused of plotting to assassinate Elizabeth, and was put on trial and sentenced to death for being found guilty of treason. Elizabeth originally hesitated to order her execution, even in the face of pressure from the English Parliament to carry out the sentence. She was concerned that the killing of a queen set a shameful precedent and was fearful of the consequences, especially if, in retaliation, Mary's son formed an alliance with the Catholic powers and invaded England. Despite this, Mary was still to be executed, and she was beheaded at Forencay Castle in 1587. She spent the last hours of her life in prayer, distributing her belongings to her household, and writing her will and a letter to the King of France. Her last words translated were, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit."
Well, everyone, let's please give a big warm welcome to Mary, Queen of Scots.
Hi.
Hi, Mary. How's it going?
It's all right, thanks.
I've heard you've had a rough couple of months. Do you want to tell us about it at all?
Yeah, so my husband Darnley has recently died in an explosion, and everyone believes that my current husband, the Earl of Bothwell, is the one behind it. And my entire Privy Council have forced me to abdicate the throne because of it. But luckily my brother, Lord Murray, is standing in as regent before my son James is old enough to be king. So at least the Protestants are giving me something to go on.
Well, at least you've got that. But you lived in France growing up. How was that? And how is it different to living, well, in Scotland as you do now?
Well, personally, I love both France and Scotland. France has a lot more etiquette than Scotland, and the food there is marvellous. But Scotland will always remain my home. The people in Scotland are who I really care about, and that's where my loyalties lie right now.
It's good that you've got them two places, but I think what a lot of people are wondering right now is, what are your plans with England?
Well, this is still not confirmed yet, but I'm planning to visit my cousin Elizabeth, Queen of England, and try to seek refuge with her. So over the year I've been in touch with her, and she's ever so lovely, but I think it's around the time that we actually meet in person, and with the power she holds, I'm certain that she'll manage to help me.
Well, that's good. So, but Elizabeth is a Protestant, and you're obviously Catholic. Can you explain to us how you deal with the cultural differences those religions bring, especially as Queen of a more or less Protestant faith?
So I just have to put the people first, basically. That's the most important part. So sure, there's going to be some people who use that against me, such as John Knox, for example, who had a grudge just because I'm a woman. But you just have to rise above it and prove that you're a leader and that you can be trusted, and that you can do well for your people and show that time and time again. And that's how I deal with them.
Well, that's good. How do you think you're going to react to leaving Scotland, the place you've lived for most of your life and the place that you quite clearly seem to love?
Well, I think that leaving my baby son James is going to be really hard. He's so precious, and although he maybe doesn't know that now, he's very important, not only to me, but also to the entire nation. With him, you know, not only one day ruling Scotland, but maybe England as well.
Well, okay, thanks for that, Mary. We'll be catching up with you a bit later. We'll go a bit more into detail about your life and how you've come to where you are today. But right now, we're going to go to David with the news.
Thank you, Matt. Well, this year's certainly been an interesting one. In early January, Abbey's Church in Middelburg had been destroyed in a fire. And in the Netherlands, the Duke of Alva had declared William of Orange an outlaw. The Duke has also beheaded 18 nobles in Brussels. Also, the Holy Roman Emperor has agreed to pay tribute to the Sultan for peace. Meanwhile, at the Battle of Hellingly, hundreds have been killed when Dutch rebels beat the Spanish. Spain are not having a great year. In July at the Battle of Eames, they were also defeated by Dutch water garrison. There's also been an uprising of Moriscos against the suppression that had been happening in Granada. Also, Mary herself has had a lot to deal with this past year, and with her recent defeat at Langside, we're currently live at the scene now with Aliyah. So could you tell us a bit more?
We're here live today in Glasgow, where just last week Mary Queen of Scots was defeated in the Battle of Langside. It has been a rough few years for Mary. Last year, Mary's husband Bothwell was mysteriously killed in an explosion at Kirkerfield, and Mary's lover, James Hepburn, the Earl of Bothwell, is still the key suspect. To add to this misfortune, her personal rule ended in recrimination and disaster when, after her capture at Carberry Hill, she was forced to abdicate in favour of James VI, her infant son. After a successful escape from captivity at Lochleven Castle, Mary managed to raise an impressive army of 6,000 men and met Moray's smaller forces here on the 13th of May. Despite this, she was still defeated and has since fled south to England, hoping her cousin would welcome her. Rumours are still floating around, however, that Mary is guilty of Darnley's murder, and Queen Elizabeth is still doubtful. She's reportedly thus ordered an inquiry for what actually went down. People believe Mary is under house arrest after she became the focus of various English Catholic and Spanish plots to overthrow Elizabeth. Everyone believes she is to live the rest of her life in exile. Is she just too risky to have around? Back to you in the studio.
So anyway, that was the news, and now we're going to go back to David again, but this time again with another performance. Take it away, David.
Cheers, Matt. This is the new single. While running in the park, you only do when it's dark. If he messes with you, he's gonna get sparked. While running in the park, you only do when it's dark. If he messes with you, he's gonna get sparked. I wanna see where you are 10 years from now, stuck in line on the dole, signing on, listening to your music. While running in the park, it said this time you got a kid with you. What's it gonna learn from this experience of any significance? Wait to let your tracksuit and find your phones. Who to make them out to look like clones. I wanna see where you are 10 years from now, stuck in line on the dole, signing on, listening to your music. I wanna see where you are 10 years from now, stuck in line on the dole, signing on, listening to your shit music. I wanna see where you are 10 years from now, stuck in line on the dole, signing on, listening to your shit music.
He loves his song, doesn't he, David? So that was David with the Panama's new single, White Lightning. But here we're back with Mary, Queen of Scots again. So, Mary, obviously in the news we saw that you were defeated at Langside. Why do you think that was?
Well, we just underestimated their army, to be honest. We were so proud of gathering the forces that we did that, you know, it just wasn't enough in the end, the amount.
So, do you think, obviously you talked about Bothwell and Darnley before, would you have ever remarried if Darnley hadn't died?
Well, that's an interesting question, actually, and I do wonder that myself sometimes. Darnley and I had a failing marriage from the start. I was extremely happy in my first marriage with Francis, to be fair. We were definitely in love, but when he passed away, I was heartbroken. I thought I'd never love again, to be honest. But then I came across Darnley, and I was happy for a while, but we had our issues of the crown matrimonial. But I didn't just want to give away my power like that, you know. From coming to Scotland, my main goal was to claim the English crown, and for that I needed to be more conscious with whom would receive power.
Well, in that case, tell us more about Bothwell. Where is he right at this time?
So last I heard of him, he was thinking of going to Denmark, and our relationship was doomed from the beginning, but it didn't hurt us to try, you know. So after Darnley turned into a drunk, he would be aggressive all the time and horrible to be around, really. But Bothwell provided me with the comfort I needed, and for that short while he did. I'm so grateful.
Well, that's good for you, I guess, especially after obviously the death of Darnley and Francis. How do you expect Elizabeth to receive you in England? Do you think that what she hears from her, the inquiry, will affect her decision to let you stay in England?
Well, mine and Elizabeth's relationship has always been an odd one, really. As I mentioned before, we have wrote to each other often, but again, I'm still a threat to her crown, so it's understandable that she'd want to keep me at arm's length, really.
Well, obviously, you talked about saying there a threat to her crown, but do you ever see yourself as both the Queen of Scotland and England?
Well, I've always aspired to combine both our nations and rule them both together. However, if this does not happen in my lifetime, I certainly would want my son James to be the sovereign of both England and Scotland.
Well, that would be good. How about, you talked about Francis before. Do you want to talk about your relationship with him? Obviously, you said that you truly did love him. How did that come about?
So we were engaged pretty much since I was a kid. So I think we were engaged when I was about 5. So for my whole life, I knew I was going to marry him. But I was raised in a convent in France, so even when I was a kid, I didn't actually see him that much. So it wasn't until I was a bit older that I went to French court for the first time, and that's when I met him. And there was a rocky patch at first because there were some tensions with France and Scotland that had nothing to do with us. It was just the countries, and England was at war with Scotland. So it was about who had more power, because the French king at the time didn't want his son to marry someone who didn't have any power, because if you're someone like a ruler, you need to marry for power. So, you know, there was a rocky bit, but eventually we were married, and it was just perfect. He was amazing.
Well, how did the father take that? Because obviously you said the father wasn't sort of happy with it because you didn't have as much power. How did he take that in the end? Did he come around?
It was basically, he was upset at first, the King of France, because the fights and the wars going on with Scotland and England meant that Scotland was in a bit of a struggle, but eventually they managed to push back against the English and regain some of that power. So by the time I actually married Francis, I had the power again, so the king wasn't bothered.
Okay. What do you think about modern monarchy nowadays? How do you view that compared to obviously your time?
Would you tell me some more about it?
Well, obviously we have the Queen. There's not as many wars between kings and queens anymore. It's more, they do some, but they don't do as much as they did in your time. It wasn't all as tense. The royal family now is the royal family in England. There's not really much else going on in the world.
So there's no royal families in the world?
There's not really a monarchy to say anymore. It's more governments.
Okay, but the royal family still has power today?
Yeah, there's still, especially in England.
Yeah.
in Scotland, not as much.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh no.
it's mainly because we've sort of connected now, and we're now the United Kingdom.
Oh, so you can rule over both Scotland and England,
Yeah.
so the legacy can live on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good then. Yeah, I
Oh.
like the idea of that then.
Okay. How you obviously talked a bit before about you being in the Covenant in France. How was that? How did?
It was tough at first because being so little and away from my parents, I had to move there because I couldn't grow up in Scotland because of the English threats against my life, because I'm a direct descendant of Henry VIII, so I'm a threat to the English throne basically. I could have a right to the throne. So I had to move to France to be protected, and I didn't know this, but while I was in the convent, I was constantly monitored. Like people would test my food for me because assassination was just rife. Like I am a threat to the English crown. The English want me dead. Even to this day, some of them want me dead because I'm a Catholic. I'm a direct descendant of Henry VIII, but that line is Protestant, and a lot of England is Protestant, so they don't want a Catholic queen.
Ah, right. For you growing up in that environment, do you think that's affected sort of the way with your like trust of other people? Obviously, you said that you didn't even know you were being monitored. Do you think
Yeah.
that obviously because people that you've trusted in the past have probably lied to you, do you think that affects your relationships
Yeah,
nowadays?
definitely. So there was so little trust, and even to like this day, this constant threat from the English. So it's really hard to build up my trust in people, like because I could, someone could want to kill me at any time because I'm a threat.
Yeah. How do you say this works out exactly how you want it to be? What happens?
So I'd like Elizabeth to give me shelter in England so that, the assassination attempts aren't as constant, because Elizabeth holds a lot of power as the Queen of England. But a lot of people are worried about what will happen with me going to England, because Elizabeth, while she is the daughter of Henry VIII, she's the daughter of his second or third or something wife. So if you think about it as if his first wife in the Catholic Church, he didn't marry the other wives in the Catholic Church. So a lot of people don't see Elizabeth as legitimate, whereas I'm a legitimate descendant. So it's complicated, really.
How do you think the English people take that?
I don't know. I don't think they'll take it very well, but me and Elizabeth, we've written to each other. I have great respect for her, and I have no doubt that she'll want to help me. She's family.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we've seen in the past that that's not always the right thing, but we will. That's all we have time for now. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, to conclude our interview, what advice would you give to young girls out there like yourself who would have had to deal with many hardships from men trying to watch you fail and put you down?
I'd just say be confident in your decisions. If you have a decision, then stick to it. I'd say that if you're ever in a situation that you don't like, try and power through it, but just remember that you're your own person and that you can walk away.
Well, that's good. That's all we have time for today. Thank you, Mary, for coming on the show, and good luck with Journeys in Guild. Thank you. We're going over to Molly.
They all need something to hold on to. They all mean well. They all respect society's given me hell. You could never feel my story. this drink to your house. Boys and girls wanna hear a true story. Saturday night was at this real wild party. There was liquor overflowing the cup, about 5 or 6 of us just trying to strip for a buck. So I took this guy outside with me. His name was, he went to junior high with me, and asked, why you up in there dancing for cash? I said, a whole lot's changed since I seen you last, and that's what you do if your son was at home. He's been crying all alone on his bedroom floor, 'cause he's hungry, and the only way to feed him is to stick the man for just a little bit of money, and his daddy's gone. He's in and out of lockdown. I ain't got a job now, and he's just smoking rock now. See, for you this is just a good time, but for me this is what I call life. He said, well, good, you ain't the only one to have a baby, so that's no excuse to be living all crazy. And then I squared him right square in the eye. I said, every day you wake up, open a die. He said, you're gonna know about pain. It hurts. Told me my sister ran away, so her daddy gonna rape us. Before I was a teenager, I've been through more shit than you can even relate to. But what you do if your son was at home? He's been crying all alone on a bedroom floor, 'cause he's hungry, and the only way to feed him is to sleep the man for just a little bit of money, and his daddy's gone. He's in and out of lockdown. I ain't got a job now, and he's just smoking rock now. See, for you this is just a good time, but for me this is what I call life. What you do if your son was at home? He's been crying all alone on his bedroom floor. See, he's hungry, and the only way to feed him is to sleep the man for just a little of his money. Now his daddy's gone. He's in and out of lockdown. I ain't got a job now, and he's just smoking rock now. See, for you this is just a good night, but for me this is my whole life.